Did you know that the results from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey indicated that roughly 73% of U.S. adults are either overweight or obese? This means 3 out of every 4 people. Now, before we get to the list, let's define overweight and obesity. These are medical conditions based on your body mass index, or BMI. It's the ratio of height to weight. In order for adults to be considered overweight, they must have a BMI of 25 or greater. And in order to be considered obese, you must have a BMI greater than 30. To put that in perspective, a woman who is 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighs a mere 150 pounds would be considered overweight. A man who is 6 feet tall and weighs 250 pounds would be considered medically obese. Our perceptions of weight have changed over time. Worldwide adult obesity, which is currently 1 in 8 people, has more than doubled since 1990, and adolescent obesity has quadrupled. Why is that? Imagine you are struggling to make ends meet. You need to provide dinner for a family of 5. You can buy a box of pasta and tomato sauce for under $3 and easily feed the family. Or even cheaper, you can buy 5 packs of ramen noodles for around $1.50. That's right, you can feed 5 people for under $2. With inflation looming and the cost of groceries outpacing most people's paychecks, these meal options are tempting. Compare that to even just 1 bag of lettuce, which can be around $4 to $5, and that's just lettuce. To feed a family of 5 an adequate and healthy meal, you would likely need 2 bags of lettuce, salad dressing, tomatoes, and a cucumber. Pair that with a protein, and you'll be spending upwards of $30. And that's being very generous and assuming that there are no other sides with the meal. Income is one of the biggest factors for obesity. Quality, organic, healthy foods are expensive, and cheap fast food-like options are far more accessible in these trying economic times. It's not just an issue of cost, although money is usually the underlying reason. Even when consumer costs are no object, there are production costs. If a person is willing and able to feed their family 3 healthy meals a day, with cost not being an issue, there is still the issue of cutting costs behind the scenes. Most foods are laced with added sugar, even in foods like tomato sauce and salad dressing that aren't categorized as sweets. With sugar being more addicting than some drugs and cheap to use as an additive, many of us are eating unhealthily without even realizing it. We are also a more sedentary society. With the internet, television, smartphones, remote jobs, schooling from age 5 to 22, we are hardly an active group of people. There are few people out at dawn tilling their fields. Most farms and commercial enterprises use industrial machinery. A farmer can sit in an air-conditioned tractor and scroll through Instagram. Even playing outside is more of a mirage from the 1950s and even 1990s than it is of the 2020s. It's also important to understand food deserts. A food desert is an area that has limited access to affordable and nutritious food. In contrast, an area with greater access to supermarkets and vegetable shops with fresh foods may be called a food oasis. Poorer regions and neighborhoods simply have less options. There are more than 34,000 dollar stores in the United States, compared to about 500 Whole Foods markets and under 600 Trader Joe's. There are also only 8,600 farmers markets nationwide. Living in a food desert means that even if you have the means and desire to eat healthy, you may not live close enough to access healthy foods. With all of this information in mind, let's look at America's most obese cities. As you may predict, they are all lower-income regions of the country. Number 10 is Chattanooga, Tennessee, with over 30% of the population being obese. Tennessee doesn't do particularly well when it comes to health overall. In the state, 44.8% of adults reported consuming fruit less than 1 time daily, and 24.3% of adults reported consuming vegetables less than 1 time daily. Tennessee has a poverty rate of over 14% and is the 11th poorest state in the U.S. Number 9 is Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which also has over 30% of its city being obese. Louisiana is an obese state, coming in the top 10 most obese states with over 1 in 4 fitting in this category. Louisiana, not surprisingly, is the 2nd poorest state in the U.S. Despite being the state capital, access to healthy food seems to be a struggle for the city. Number 8 is Lafayette, Louisiana, which keeps us in the 2nd poorest state. More than half of Lafayette residents live in a food desert. Access to healthy foods on the north side has been a growing issue as many traditional grocery stores have left the area over the past decade. Locals have tried to combat this problem with solutions like community fridges and gardens. But the need for easier access to healthier foods continues to be a problem for Lafayette. Number 7 is Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is actually getting better given that a few years ago it was the second most obese city. But in 2024, it lands at number 7. The obesity crisis in Memphis was particularly apparent during COVID, when those with 2 or more medical conditions such as obesity and age made people more vulnerable to the effects of COVID. Drive across the state of Tennessee and cross one time zone, and you'll find yourself at number 6 in Knoxville. This one is more surprising since Knoxville is a college town, home to UT Knoxville and the famous Vol State football team. But still, Knoxville Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics have identified over 20 food deserts within the city. This disparity between the excess of college haves and the local have-nots creates a tale of two cities. One in which access to good food is limited, and one where those in college can eat to their heart's content on a college campus. Number 5 is Little Rock, Arkansas, or should we say, not so Little Rock. Arkansas is the 6th poorest state, which again makes this city no surprise. We also see another state capital make the list. Nearly 38% of the city is obese. There are also many food deserts in Little Rock, but the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance has been leading the charge, prioritizing getting a food oasis into its cities. Number 4 is Mobile, Alabama. Alabama is the 7th poorest state in the country, so it makes sense that the city would fail in several health metrics. The city scores only a 48 out of 100 in its overall health score. Nearly 13% of the city has no health insurance, and the life expectancy in Mobile is 2 years less than the national average. The rate of adult smokers is also higher than the national average. With obesity comes other health issues like diabetes, and Mobile has a higher rate of diabetes than the nation overall. Number 3 is Shreveport, Louisiana. Louisiana tied with Tennessee for having the most cities on this list, and Shreveport is no exception. Shreveport is 3 and 4 hours away from Lafayette and Baton Rouge, respectively. In Shreveport, a staggering 36% are obese, and an additional 36% are overweight. That means that 72% of the city weighs more than it should. Shreveport, like many on this list, is fraught with food deserts. Luckily, an initiative called Shreveport Green is paving the way for providing access to fresh food throughout the city. Hillary Frazier, Shreveport's assistant director and mobile market coordinator, said, "We bring food to areas that are typically food deserts, areas where it's hard to get to a grocery store." Number 2 is Jackson, Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the country. It likely didn't have more spots on this list because it doesn't have that many big cities. Many businesses closed down during the pandemic, and Jackson was hit particularly hard. With grocery stores closing, vital food sources closed with it, leaving a multitude of food deserts in Jackson. And number 1 is McAllen, Texas. Everything is bigger in Texas, and apparently every person is also bigger in Texas, or at least in McAllen. In McAllen, a whopping 45% of adults are obese, and another 31% are overweight. That means that 76% of the city weighs more than it should, outpacing the already overweight national average. This South Texas city also ranked high in youth obesity ranks, coming in second for both percentages of teenagers and children who are obese. The city also ranks third for heart disease and fourth for their share of the population with diabetes. The cause of poor health in McAllen is about more than just a lack of access to nutritious food. Low access to quality health care in the Rio Grande Valley is also likely a factor impacting the weight-related disease rates. The region has a shortage of nurses and physicians, making it difficult to receive adequate care.